Iowa.
Mr. President, almost 2 years ago, I announced I was not going to seek a sixth term in the United States Senate. That decision and that announcement didn't seem all that difficult or hard at that time. You know, after all, 2 years was a long time off. Since then, I've been busy with having hearings and meeting constituents and getting legislation through the Health Committee and working on appropriations. But now, knowing this will be my final formal speech on the floor of the U.S. Senate, now knowing that in a few days a semi-truck's going to pull up to the Hart Building and load hundreds of boxes of my records of 40 years, 30 in the Senate and 10 in the House, and haul all that off to Drake University and the Harkin Institute on Public Policy and Civic Engagement in Des Moines, Iowa. Now, seeing my office at 731 Hart Building stripped almost bare and the shelves cleaned. Now, when I will soon cast my last vote. Now, when I will no longer be engaged in legislative battle, when I will no longer be summoned by the Senate bells. Now, when I will soon just be number 1,763 of all of the senators who have ever served in the United States Senate. Now the leaving becomes hard and wrenching and emotional. And that's because I love the United States Senate. I love my work here. It's been said by a lot of pundits that the Senate's broken. No, it's not. The Senate's not broken. Oh, maybe a few dents, a couple of scrapes here and there, you know, banged up a little bit. But there is still no other place in America where one person can do big things, for good or for ill, for our people and our nation. I love the people with whom I work. This is a deaf sign, I-L-Y. It means I love you. Senators, staff, clerks, Congressional Research Service, doorkeepers, cloakroom, police, restaurant employees, and yes, the pages. Especially to those who labor outside the lights and the cameras and the news stories, who make this Senate function on a daily basis. I thank you. I particularly want to thank my wonderful, hardworking, dedicated staff, both present and past, both personal and committee staff. And when I say committee staff, I mean the Appropriations Subcommittee on Labor, Health, and Human Services, which I've been privileged to chair or be ranking member of since 1989. I mean also the Committee on Agriculture, on which I have served since 1985, which I chaired twice for 2 farm bills, once in 2001 and 2002, and the second one in 2007 and 2009. I mean the Committee on Health, Education, Labor, and Pensions, which I have chaired since the untimely death of Senator Ted Kennedy in 2009. Now, I first heard Pat Leahy say this, so I always attribute it to him. He once said that we senators are just a constitutional impediment to the smooth functioning of staff. This is truer than most of us would probably like to admit. Also, in thanking my staff, I don't just mean those who work in Washington. I would never have been reelected 4 times without the hands-on, day in, day out constituent service of my Iowa staff. The casework they have done in helping people with problems is every bit as important as any legislative work done here in Washington. In 2012, our office marked a real milestone. The 100,000th constituent service case that we've processed since 1985. I cannot count the number of times Iowans have personally thanked me for something my staff has done to help them. Well, there's a story out our way that I've heard for a long time. A little story goes like this. If you're driving down a country road and you see a turtle, got that image, a turtle sitting on a fence post, you can be sure of one thing. It didn't get there by itself. Well, I can relate to that turtle. I didn't get here by myself. My staff helped. So I thank my staff of past and present who have so strongly supported me when I was right, so diplomatically corrected me when I was wrong, and who all labored in a shared commitment to provide a hand up, a ladder of opportunity to those who had been dealt a bad hand in the lottery of life. I ask consent, Mr. President, to list the names of my staff so they will be forever enshrined in the history of the United States Senate.
Without objection.
But most of all, I thank my wife, Ruth, the love of my life, my wife of 46 years. You have been my constant companion, my soulmate, my strongest supporter, and my most honest critic. You've been my joy in happy times and my solace when things just didn't go right. So I'm looking forward to more adventures and love and excitement with you in the years ahead. To our two beautiful, smart, caring, and compassionate daughters, Amy and Jenny, I thank you for always being there for your dad, for giving me such wondrous joy in being a part of your growing up. I am so proud of both of you. And to my son-in-law, Steve, and to my grandkids, McQuaid and Daisy and Luke, look out. Here comes Grandpa. There is so much I want to say, but I want to be respectful of those who have come to share this moment with me, my staff, here and there, my family and friends and fellow senators. But I want to state as briefly as I can why I'm here. What has propelled me? What has been my guiding philosophy for all these years? It has to do with that ladder of opportunity that I just mentioned. You see, there's nothing wrong in America with being a success. There's nothing wrong with having more money and having a nicer home and a nicer car and sending your kids to good schools and having nice vacations and a great retirement. That is a big part of the American dream. But I believe that when you make it to the top, and you make it to the top, and you make it to the top, and I make it to the top, one of the primary responsibilities of our free government is to make sure we leave the ladder down for others to climb. Now, mind you, I said a ladder. I didn't say an escalator. See, an escalator is a free ride. Don't believe in that. But if you follow my analogy a little bit more, with a ladder, you still have to exert energy and effort, initiative to get up. But in order to do that, there must be rungs on that ladder. That's where government comes in. To put some rungs there. The bottom rungs, everything from maternal and child health care programs, the Head Start, the best public schools, the best teachers, affordable and accessible college, job training. Sometimes people fall off that ladder. Sometimes through no fault of their own. They have an illness, they have an accident. That's why we have a safety net, to catch them. Things like disability insurance and workman's compensation, job retraining programs, to get them back up on that ladder once again. 35 years ago, we looked around America and we saw millions of people that no matter how hard they tried, could never climb that ladder of success. No matter how hard they tried, could never do it. These were our fellow Americans, our brothers and sisters with disabilities. So what did government do? We built them a ramp, and we called it the Americans with Disabilities Act. Now again, we didn't build a moving walkway, did we? See, with a ramp, you still have to exert energy and initiative to get up. I've often said there's not one dime, not one nickel in the Americans with Disabilities Act given to a person with a disability. What we did is we broke down the barriers. We opened the doors of accessibility and accommodation, and we said to people with disabilities, now go on. Follow your dreams. And in the words of the Army motto, be all you can be. I can remember standing here, leading the charge on the Americans with Disabilities Act. And once again, I feel a lot like that turtle. Had a lot of people helping. When I think of the Americans with Disabilities Act, I think of people like Senator Lowell Weicker, Senator Bob Dole, Senator Ted Kennedy. In the Senate. In the House, Tony Coelho and Steve Bartlett, Steny Hoyer. In the executive branch, at the head of it all, President George Herbert Walker Bush. Attorney General Dick Thornburgh, Boyden Gray. And on the outside, people like Ed Roberts and Mark Abristow, Bob Kafka, and the indomitable Justin Dart. And here, the one person who worked his heart out to bring it together, it's that staff again, I tell you about that staff. Bobby Silverstein. Would never have happened without him. And so I believe that government must not be just an observant bystander to life. It must be a force for good, for lifting people up, for giving hope to the hopeless. You know, I've never had an I Love Me wall in my office. What I did have were 2 items on the wall by my door when I walk out to go vote or go to a committee meeting or whatever. One is a drawing of the house in which my mother was born and lived until she was 25 years of age when she immigrated to America. That small little house was in Suha, Yugoslavia. It's now Suha, Slovenia. That little house had a dirt floor and no running water. That was my mother's house. The second item on my wall is this. It's my father's WPA card. And it says, notice to report for work on a project. WPA Form 402. It's to Patrick F. Harkin, Cumming, Iowa. You're asked to report for work at once on a project as a laborer for $40.30 per month. And the signature by supervisor. It's dated 7/19/39. 4 months to the day before I was born. So get this picture. My father was then 53 years old. He had worked most of the time in the coal mines of southern Iowa, not in the best of health. There were no jobs. No jobs. Life looked pretty bleak. Things looked hopeless. And then my father, who only had a 6th grade education, as he told me later, he always said, I got a letter from Franklin Roosevelt. He always thought Franklin Roosevelt sent this to him personally, you see. I got that letter from Franklin Roosevelt, and I got a job. It was important for a lot of reasons, not only for the money and the dignity of work, but it gave my father hope. Hope that tomorrow would be better than today, that our family would stay together. See, we had 5 kids and the 6th one on the way, me. And it gave him hope that his kids would have a better future. I often think that the project he worked on is called Lake Aquabi. My friend Senator Grassley knows about Lake Aquabi. It's right south of Des Moines. It's a state park now with a lake and recreation, and people still use it today. Every federal judge who is sworn in takes an oath to, quote, do equal right to the poor and to the rich. To do equal right to the poor and to the rich. Can we here in Congress say that we do that? That we provide equal right to the poor and the rich alike? Our growing inequality proves we are not. Maybe we should be taking that oath. There are 4 overriding issues that I hope this Senate will address in its coming session and in the years ahead. Number 1, as I mentioned, the growing economic inequality in America. It's destructive of lives, it slows our progress as a nation, and it will doom broad support for representative government. When people at the bottom of the economic ladder feel that the government is not helping them, and in fact may be stacked against them, they will cease to vote, or they will turn to the siren song of extreme elements in our society. History proves this to be true. Now, I don't have a cookie-cutter answer or solution, but it must include more fair tax laws and trade laws, more job training and retraining, rebuilding our physical infrastructure and manufacturing. And I believe it must include some things seemingly unrelated, like quality, free, early education for every child in America. The answer to closing the inequality gap must include rebuilding labor unions and collective bargaining. If you trace the line over the last 40 years of the growing economic inequality in America, and also put that over another line showing the loss in the number of union workers, they are almost identical. I do not believe it is a stretch to say that organized labor, unions, built the middle class in America, and they are a part of the answer in strengthening and rebuilding our middle class. Another part of the answer, I believe, is raising the minimum wage to above the poverty line and indexing it for inflation for the future. We need more flex time laws, especially for women in our workforce. We need to strengthen Social Security, as in Senator Brown's bill. Not cutting, not raising the retirement age, but strengthening Social Security. We need a new retirement system for all workers in America. Not another 401k, but a system in which employers and employees contribute and which can only be withdrawn as an annuity for life after one retires. I ask you to look at what the Netherlands has, that type of retirement system. Lack of a reliable retirement is one of the most underreported, unexamined crises on our national horizon, and it's a big part of our growing inequality. Finally, we must continue to build on the Affordable Care Act. The cost and availability of good health care has in the past widened that inequality gap, and we're now starting to close that element of the inequality. I believe we need to add a public option to the exchange as another choice for people. And we must continue support for prevention and public health, moving us more and more away from sick care to real health care. The second overriding issue confronting us, I believe, is the destruction of the family of man's only home, our planet Earth, through the continued use of fossil fuels. We know what's happening. The science is irrefutable. The data is clear. The warning signs are flashing in neon bright red. Stop what you're doing with fossil fuels. We must shift massively and quickly to renewable energy, a new smart electric grid, retrofitting our buildings for energy efficiency, and moving rapidly to a hydrogen-based energy cycle. The third issue I commend to the Senate for further development and changes in existing laws is the underemployment of people with disabilities. As you all know, ensuring the equal rights and opportunities for people with disabilities has been a major part of my work in the Senate for the past 30 years. We have made significant strides forward in changing America to fulfill 2 of the 4 goals of the Americans with Disabilities Act. Those 2 are full participation and equal opportunity. We've done all right on those. The other 2 goals, independent living and economic self-sufficiency, need more development. I ask you all in the next Congress to do 2 things to advance these 2 goals of independent living and economic self-sufficiency. First, help states implement the Supreme Court's decision in the Olmstead case to more rapidly deinstitutionalize people with disabilities and provide true independent living with support services. This will save money, and individuals with disabilities' lives will be better and more truly independent. Secondly, we must do more on employment of people with disabilities in competitive integrated employment. You know, we all get the monthly unemployment figures every month. Last month, unemployment held steady at 5.8% officially. My friend Leo Hendry has better calculations to show that the real rate is probably about twice that figure. Also, we know that the unemployment rate among African Americans is about twice that, 11.1%. How many of us know that the unemployment rate among adult Americans with disabilities who can work and want to work is over 60%? Yes, you heard me right. Almost 2 out of every 3 Americans with a disability who want to work and who can work cannot find a job. That is a blot on our national character. Thankfully, some enlightened employers have affirmative action plans to hire more people with disabilities. Employers are finding that many times these become their best employees. They're more productive. They're the hardest working, the most reliable workers. I asked you to meet with Greg Wasson, the CEO of Walgreens, and Randy Lewis, who was the senior vice president there, now retired. Walgreens has hired many people with disabilities in their distribution centers, and now Mr. Wasson has set a goal of 10% of all of their store employees will be people with disabilities. This needs to be emulated by businesses all over America. There are others making strides in this area. I mentioned a few: Best Buy, Lowe's, Home Depot, IBM, Marriott. Some of the other large companies that are moving forward, hiring people with disabilities. We need to learn from them what we, the federal and, yes, maybe the state government, can do to help in this area. And we also need to implement policies to help small businesses, employ more people with disabilities. Now, I dwell on this, perhaps because I feel I haven't done enough on this issue of employment for people with disabilities, and we just have to do better. I will say, however, that our Help Committee passed this year, President Obama signed into law, a new reauthorization of the old Workforce Investment Act, now named the Workforce Investment and Opportunity Act. In this law, there's a new provision that I worked on with others to get more intervention in high school for kids with disabilities to prepare them for the workplace through things like summer jobs, job coaching, internships. However, this is just starting, and funding is tight. But it will do much for young people with disabilities to enter competitive integrated employment. And I want to thank all members of the Help Committee for their support of this bill, but especially Senator Murray, Senator Isaacson, for taking the lead to get this bill done, along with Senator Enzi, Senator Alexander, and me. And while I'm mentioning the Help Committee, let me thank all members of the Help Committee for a very productive last 2 years, during which we passed 24 bills signed into law by the President. Important bills dealing with things like drug track and tracing, compounding drugs, the Workforce Investment Act I just mentioned, the Child Care Development Block Grant, Newborn Screening Act, and many more. And I see him here on the floor, and I want to publicly again thank Senator Lamar Alexander for being a great partner in all these efforts. Senator Alexander will be taking the helm of this great committee in the next Congress. Senator Alexander certainly has the background to lead this committee, but he also combines that background with a keen mind and a good heart. And I wish him continued success as the new chairman of the Help Committee. The fourth issue that I hope future Senates will take care of concerns the UN Convention on the Rights of People with Disabilities. I don't think anything has saddened me more in my 30 years here in the Senate than the failure of this body to ratify the Convention on the Rights of People with Disabilities, or the CRPD as it's known. It's been ratified by 150 nations. It's modeled after our own Americans with Disabilities Act. It has broad and deep support throughout our country, supported by the U.S. Chamber of Commerce, the Business Roundtable, veterans groups, every disability organization, every former living president, every former Republican leader of this Senate, Senator Dole, Senator Lott, Senator Frist. In November, we received a letter of support from the National Association of Evangelicals supporting it. And I also want to point out, Senator Dole has worked his heart out on this. Many of you remember he was here on the floor 2 years ago this month, right before we brought it up, and I thought we had the votes for it. Under our Constitution, it takes 2/3. We failed by 6 votes. But Bob Dole has never given up on this, never. Well, I hope the next Senate will take this up and join with the rest of the world in helping to make changes globally for people with disabilities. So I came to Congress, the House, in 1974 as one of the Watergate babies. With my retirement and the retirement in the House of Congressman George Miller and Congressman Henry Waxman, we are the last of the so-called Watergate babies, with 2 exceptions. Among all the Democrats elected in that landslide year of 1974, there were a few Republicans, and one is left. My senior colleague from the state of Iowa, Senator Chuck Grassley. I have the greatest respect for and friendship with Chuck. Several weeks ago here on the floor, he said some very gracious things about me, and I thank him for that. I especially appreciated his observation, though, that even though he and I are like night and day when it comes to political views, there's no light between us when it comes to Iowa. We have collaborated on so many important initiatives for the people of Iowa, and I think we made a heck of a good tag team on behalf of our state. So again, I salute and thank my friend and colleague of nearly 40 years, Chuck Grassley. Carry on, Chuck. And the other exception I mentioned is my, again, lifelong dear friend Rick Nolan, who was in the 1974 class, voluntarily left Congress after 3 terms, returned to the House in 2012, and was recently reelected. So 40 years later, this Watergate baby is grown up and gray. I came to the Senate 30 years ago as a proud progressive, determined to get things done. As I depart the Senate, I can say in good conscience that I remain true to my progressive roots. I have worked faithfully to leave behind a more vibrant Iowa, a more just and inclusive America, and a stronger ladder and ramp of opportunity for the disadvantaged in our country. You might say that my career in Congress is the story of a poor kid from Cumming, Iowa, population 150, trying his best to pay it forward, saying thank you for the opportunities I was given, by leaving that ladder and ramp of opportunity stronger for those who follow. If I have accomplished this in any small way, If many Americans are able to lead better lives because of my work, I leave office a satisfied person. So I am retiring from the Senate, but I'm not retiring from the fight. I will never retire from the fight to ensure equal opportunity, full participation, independent living, and economic self-sufficiency for every disabled person in America. I will never retire from the fight to give a hand up and hope to those who have experienced disadvantage and adversity. And I will never retire from the fight to make this a land of social and economic justice for all Americans. Let me close with a single word from American Sign Language. On July the 13th of 1990, I stood here and gave an entire speech in sign language. Confused Senator Kennedy, who was sitting in the chair, he didn't know what, Senator Kerry didn't know what to do. And the recording clerk didn't know what to do either. But then I had to give it verbally. Well, I didn't want to do that today. But there's one sign that I want to leave with you. It says something. It's powerful. Powerful. One of the most beautiful signs in American Sign Language. And might I teach it to you? Take your hands and put them together like this. Put your fingers together, put your fingers together. I tell everyone, put your hands together like that. And you kind of close, and it looks like an A when you do that. And move it in a circle in front of your body. That's it, Pages, you got it. That's it. It's like that. This is the sign for America. Think about it. Think about it. All of us interconnected, bound together in a single circle of inclusion. No one left out. This is the ideal America toward which we must always, always aspire. And with that, Mr. President, for the last time, I yield the floor.